Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Impossible Truths, Amazing Evidence of Extraterrestrial Contact by Erich von Daniken, narrated by Charles Constant. Publisher's Note: this audiobook includes bonus material. Please visit Tantor.com and type Impossible Truths into the search box. Follow the link to the book's page, then, under the Supplemental Content section, please enter the access code Monolith, and then click the Unlock button to access the bonus material. The code should be entered in all lowercase letters. All figures and tables referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material. A letter to my listeners. Dear listener, my book, The Stones of Kiribati, first came out in 1981, getting on for 40 years ago now. The Gods and Their Grand Design followed a year later. Even the comparatively more recent title, Arrival of the Gods, in which I wrote about the Nazca complex, is already 20 years old. Back then, I wrote about the inexplicable stone workings at Sacsayhuaman, above the city of Cusco in Peru. I was the first to write about Buritaca 200, a mysterious jungle settlement in the Sierra Nevada of Colombia, and I also theorized about the world's greatest picture book in the Nazca Desert of Peru. My books sold all around the world. But now there's a new generation that seems not to know much about any of this. In conversation, I get this kind of response every day. Buritaca? What is that? Sacsayhuaman? Never heard of it. Nazca? Isn't that the UFO place in Mexico? Getting frustrated with this sort of thing doesn't do anyone any good. I tell myself that it is as it is, and I can't expect people to share my interests or want to engage with the same riddles from the past that fascinate me. And yet, I am convinced that people will be just as intrigued as I am in these mysteries if the evidence is put before them. All a researcher can do to engage a new generation is to present the evidence once more and add to it where possible. So, what has happened in the decades since my books were first published? How has the picture changed? Have we solved the riddles, or have we found new evidence that can take us toward a solution? The truth is that we still haven't solved the riddles. We know today as little as we did 100 years ago about the Tejo obelisk and the Raimondi stele, both found in the ruins of Chavin de Huantar in Peru. We have probably wasted valuable time attempting to decipher them, inspired by a succession of explosive theories about their meaning. Since I wrote my last books, the jungle city of Buritaca in Colombia has opened up to tourism, and through that something else has emerged. We now know the creation stories of the indigenous Kagaba Kogi peoples, whose ancestors built the city. The genesis of the Kagaba Kogi has been a tough nut to crack. But what of Nazca? Haven't we heard every possible theory on that subject by now? In this book, I spend just a couple of pages discussing Nazca for the benefit of those who haven't read my previous books. Then I let the 38 pictures of Nazca do the rest of the talking for me. Most of these images have never been published before. All of them will take your breath away. It is incredible how much there is to marvel at in the Peruvian desert. And, as I shall explain, nothing at all in these images fits in with the scientific explanations we already have. Much less well known than Nazca's images are the gigantic earth drawings that exist by the Aral Sea, between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Chile, and Mexico. It would be a mistake to think that Nazca is unique. That would be to miss the most exciting part of the story. In fact, Nazca is worldwide, as are the ancient descriptions of flying machines found in so many traditions. The earth drawings that can be seen all around the world are connected, and what lies behind them all is dynamite. Have you read anything about the meaning of the Tunjo stones in Colombia? About rocks in Saudi Arabia that have been turned to glass? About a petrified forest in Patagonia where the logs seem to have been sawn through? There's nothing surprising about sawn logs until you realize that the sawing must have occurred millennia ago, at a time when neither saws nor human beings as we now know them existed. Did you know that every culture of ancient times can be shown to lie on a 40,000-kilometer, 24,000-mile, band running around the world? Did you know that Nazca is exactly as far from Giza in Egypt as Giza is from Teotihuacan in Mexico, or that the distance from Angkor Wat in Cambodia to Nazca is the same as the distance from Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan to Easter Island in the South Pacific. There is much to think about here. The world of the distant past is amazing. Studying the archaeological evidence changes our perceptions, raises new questions, and throws into doubt the natural course of evolution. Of course, evolution exists, but that's not all there is. I invite you now to open your mind and immerse yourself in a world of impossible truths. Yours, Erich von Daniken. Chapter 1. From Peru to Jerusalem. On the 18th of April, 1980, I visited the archaeological site at Chavín de Huántar in Peru with 3 companions. Months before, I had read something in a magazine about this place, a mysterious temple of an unknown culture. I studied a map and worked out that Chavín de Huántar was somewhere high up in the Andes. That April, I rented a car and, at the crack of dawn, drove out of Lima on the Panamericana del Norte in the direction of Trujillo, the 3rd most populous city in Peru. In the small town of Pativilca, I turned right toward the mountains. The ascent out of the rusty browned canyon begins in a series of tight serpentine bends and makes a seemingly endless climb to a height of 2,600 meters, 8,500 feet, and the last gas station at Cajaque. The road takes you a further 80 kilometers, 50 miles, to the village of Catac, from where the road becomes a steep dirt track that leads up to the icy mountain lake of Caracocha. Then, at an altitude of 4,510 meters, 14,800 feet, you enter the tunnel of the Kawish Pass. I say tunnel, but this is no slick alpine thoroughfare as you would get in Europe. Some 500 meters, 1,650 feet long, the Kawish Pass is roughly hewn from the mountain rock and full of deep potholes, with glacier water edging its way half-frozen down the passage walls. Once through the tunnel, there's a steep descent into the Mauna Valley. The dirt road winds its way downward, one curve curling into another like an endless snake. You learn to avert your eyes, because a deadly chasm threatens over the edge of the road. At the tiny village of Machak, at 3,180 meters, 10,400 feet, you finally reach the valley floor. The ruins of the village complex of Chavín de Huántar lie neglected by the side of the road. This site really does deserve to be called mysterious, because no one knows who built it or has managed to decipher the curious representations on its stelae and walls. In an attempt to classify, archaeologists speak nebulously of a Chavín culture, whatever that's supposed to mean. All the ruins together form a surface area of about 13 hectares, 32 acres, and most of the site stands upon an artificial stone platform. The principal structure is 73 meters long and 70 meters wide, 240 by 230 feet, and constructed out of granite blocks. The blocks at the bottom are the best preserved, figures 1 to 3, which can be found in the bonus material, resting on well-cut flagstones on a leveled surface. It is obvious that there must have been, at some point in the deep past, a group of masterful engineers at work here. The main gate, Figure 4, of the complex aligns with the east. 2 columns, surmounted by a 9-meter, 30-foot monolith, mark the entrance. As it happens, I've never clarified to my own satisfaction what this main gate was really supposed to be. Today, several monoliths and a heap of rubble lie behind it, apparently washed up there during flooding. Lying on a deeper level than the overall complex is the sunken square, Figure 5. From here, 4 sets of steps lead out in precisely the 4 cardinal directions. So where are the secrets that make this site so mysterious? A network of corridors and smaller spaces exist beneath the main building. This network seems to have functioned as a drainage system to disperse the periodic flooding of 2 streams. In the southeast flows the small Mauna, and in the northwest the Huachexa stream. The latter originates in a high mountain lake, and when the ice melts, its banks break like bursting dams. Since the time that the area fell into disuse, Chavín de Huántar has been afflicted by several outbreaks of flooding. In 1919, the Peruvian archaeologist Julio C. Tello carried out extensive excavations. When he returned to the site in 1934, a flood had destroyed a part of the main wing. Theo wrote that 1/3 of the complex, which he had seen still intact in 1919, had now been swept away. Many underground corridors and canals had been washed out. I have crawled along some of these corridors myself. If they don't finish up at a dead end, you eventually re-emerge into daylight in a different part of the site. Sometimes I slid out through circular shaft entrances and via rectangular slits in the tunnel. Figures 6 through 10. The corridor ceilings are made up of monoliths, just like those in the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt, figures 11 through 12, and the walls are made up of monolithic blocks. It's in these blocks that we encounter the riddles of Chavin de Huántar. The irregular stone walls were originally covered with carved panels, several of which were still lying on the ground when I visited in April 1980, figures 13 through 15. Others, washed away by the floods, were deposited outside the temple. But what do they depict? Figure 16 makes no sense at all. In figures 17 and 18, the tusk-like teeth of these difficult-to-define beings look identical. Figure 19 reveals a figure holding a rounded object in its fist, and figure 20, according to expert opinion, is supposed to depict a jaguar. That's strange. Figure 21 shows a similar jaguar. But since when have jaguars had snakes on their backs and the talons of a bird of prey? The image of this monster reminds me of those cargo cults that claim that ritualistic honoring of technology, such as airports and airplanes, will bring with it material wealth, cargo. The depictions are finely chiseled representations, as if cut into the granite using a dentist's drill. Figure 22 shows 2 winged cherubim, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, cleanly engraved out of the panel. In all, as a local archaeologist told me, there were once 14 of these flying beings depicted at the site. 7 had looked north and 7 south. Today only fragments of these images remain recognizable. At the heart of one of the underground intersections stands El Lanzón, the spectacular carved stele whose name means the lance or spear. El Lanzón is almost 4 meters, 12 feet high. However, the corridors around it are only about 1 meter, 3 feet wide, and 2 meters, 6 feet high. The stele, which is twice as high as the tunnels, could not have been maneuvered around any of the underground corners. It's clear that the planners of Chavin de Huántar must have maintained an opening in the ceiling from the very beginning of its construction in order to drop El Lanzón onto the crossroads inside the temple interior at a later stage. The carvings on El Lanzón, figure 23, are just as obscure as all the other sculpture we have been considering. And the stone heads, figures 24 through 27, that protrude from the walls of the tunnels are equally inexplicable. We have no idea who these skulls are supposed to represent. And things get even weirder. In the open air of the sunken square, one of Julio Tello's colleagues found an obelisk that today stands in the Archaeological Museum of Lima. Known as the Tello obelisk, figures 28 to 33, it has baffled even the most knowledgeable Peruvian archaeologists since its discovery, and it is still waiting to be deciphered. Like hundreds of other onlookers, I have stood uncomprehendingly in front of it, photographing the object from every angle, hoping for enlightenment, but nothing. Then there is more. The least comprehensible of all the mystifying artifacts from Chavin de Huántar is the Raimondi stele. Peruvian geographer and scientist Antonio Raimondi found this wonder in the center of the Chavin de Huántar complex and had it transported to Lima in 1873. When it comes to inscrutability, this spectacular incised granite slab breaks every record. Fashioned out of black diorite, the Raimondi stele is 1.75 meters, almost 6 feet high, 73 centimeters, 2.5 feet wide, and 17 centimeters, 7 inches thick. On the Mohs scale of mineral hardness, with 1 being the softest and 10 the hardest, diorite has a rating of 8. Only diamonds can cut into it. The delicacy of the engravings, figures 34 and 35, testifies to an inconceivable precision, to the use of jigs and rotating drills. With all that in mind, what does academic opinion say about the Raimondi stele? Here's a snapshot. Professor Dr. Miloslav Stingle. The Raimondi stele represents the jaguar man. From out of his godlike head, more and more highly stylized jaguar men are growing. Dr. H.D. Disselhoff. An upright jaguar man, holding in each hand a multifaceted scepter richly decorated with curves. The lower part ends in stylized heads of beasts of prey, and the upper part a plant-based emblem. Dr. Rudolf Pörtner and Dr. Nigel Davies. Represents a figure with the head of a beast of prey. Both of its hands, pointing out at right angles, hold a decorated rod, which extends far beyond the head of the figure. Headdress with mouths layered one on top of the other and tongues hanging out, and snake heads. Professor Hermann Trimborn. Shows in flat relief a feline monster with scepters in its claws. It is crowned by a whole structure made from the yawning maws of beasts of prey, from which serpents emanate. Professor Horst Nachtigall. An half-animal, half-human standing figure is depicted, with an animal head and a decorative headdress consisting of monsters' heads framed by a glowing halo. Hands and feet show animal claws. A snake belt encircles the body. Professor Dr. Siegfried Huber. The details of the relief carving are like codes: fangs, snake heads, puzzling interlacing eyes, symbolic without explanation, surreal if any word at all can fit with it, a petrified, threatening gesture of a fear-filled existence. Dr. Friedrich Katz. Here, too, we can find hair in the form of snakes and facial features which are strongly reminiscent of a jaguar. The Raimondi stone is made up of a stratification of several bodies and faces in an almost hideous form. Dr. H. G. Franz. In the standing figure, the cult leader, priest, and shaman is depicted with a mask, which appears as a face mask or a masking shawl made of animal pelts in a fantastical reformation. Dr. Inga von Wedemeyer. The consummate image of the highest incarnation of the Godhead, the creator god Viracocha. That's really a mishmash of interpretations from the experts. Every one of them can see something different. Which interpretation do we believe? The highly stylized jaguar man? Plant-like emblems? Mouths with tongues hanging out? A monster with scepters? Maws of beasts of prey? A monster head with decorative headdress? A fear-filled existence? Hair in snake form? A cult leader wearing a mask? Animal pelts? The creator god Viracocha? As with so much that comes from the old world, these ways of interpreting the Raimondi stele have the whiff of misunderstood technology. Perhaps it's less a question of jaguar men or highly stylized heads, masks piled high, or scepters, and more of a motor powered by a steam engine, a highly technical machine with many functions. This idea is not as audacious as it sounds. Dr. Wolfgang Vollkrot, a brilliant German engineer without any archaeological preconceptions, has interpreted every detail of the carvings on the Raimondi stele as pure technology. By the simple act of viewing the stele upside down, the correlations become obvious. He has identified a steam-producing boiler with latched retaining springs, injection nozzles, snap levers, rotary pistons, air ducts, leaf springs, and ball joints. Figures 36 and 37. It's a convincing technological interpretation that makes sense out of every detail on the Raimondi stele, leaving nothing out. So what was the purpose of this machine? Vollkrot believes it must have been used to hoist, cut, and transport heavy loads. The question is how these ancient people, the builders of Chavin de Huantar, would have picked up the technical knowledge required to construct such a machine. Or, to turn it around, who sent them this carefully constructed multi-function steam engine, and who instructed them in its usage? More questions. Who gave the Ark of the Covenant to the prophet Moses in the Bible? Who gave the biblical Noah the exact dimensions for building an ark? Who destroyed the enemies of the Pharaoh with a winged sun disk coming out of the sky? Who carried our ancestor Abraham into the cosmos? In which workshop did the flying machines known as vimanas originate in ancient India? Who were the Watchers of the Heavens in the book of the prophet Enoch? Who was his teacher in astronomy? And so it goes on. Ancient texts abound with descendants of mysterious heavenly instructors. The very existence of Chavin de Huantar continues to mystify the experts. The site has no precedent, and its development is impossible to position on the established human timeline. This problem has become apparent to archaeologists. Professor Dr. Miloslav Stingler, a member of the Czech Academy of Sciences, says, "The appearance of Chavin culture resembles rather an explosion, an unexpected discharge, the effects and consequences of which are in fact dispersed right across Peru." From Dr. H.D. Disselhoff, an expert in Peruvian art, history, and culture, we have, "It's my conviction that a still unexplained influence from the outside contributed to the development of Chavin culture." This is exactly the point made by German ethnologist Professor Walter Krickeberg. It has often been pointed out that the development of higher culture in ancient America did not take place in slow, continuous steps, but in leaps and bounds. You could almost say explosively. The oldest American high cultures appear on the scene without any advance notice. This includes, in the Andean countries, those of Chavin. This remarkable phenomenon can only then be satisfactorily explained if you assume that there were one or several impulses which have acted upon the old America from the outside. And this is how it is. Chavin de Huántar did not experience any slow-moving evolutionary development. Let's think about this. People cleared and leveled off 50,000 square meters, 538,000 square feet, of uneven, rocky terrain in the high mountains. A deep-lying drainage system was designed in such a way that the later, upper buildings fitted exactly to the underground infrastructure. Expert knowledge was needed of advanced stoneworking tools and of how to transport the blocks over mountainous terrain. There were artists on hand with the ability to engrave, with incredible precision, innumerable granite and diorite plates. The Raimondi stele proves that they must have used diamond drills to do this. What kind of team could do this? And what do those engravings really depict? The hybrid animal humans they often show could just as easily be seen as robots. Did the artists have any idea what they were portraying, and were they acting out some notions of tradition, or did a mighty unknown power tell them what to do? And why do the whole thing in the first place? Ancient texts from all cultures describe events that could never have actually happened. In the Bible, for example, the prophet Elijah flies up to heaven with fiery horses. Our ancient ancestors knew that a horse can no more fly than spit fire. In the same way, there were no flying jaguars, let alone flying snakes, which the Maya speak of. In the Sumerian-Babylonian poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the heroes Gilgamesh and Enkidu hurl bolts toward a monster. Chumumba himself saw them coming. He had paws like a lion. His body was covered with bronze scales. On his feet were the claws of a vulture, and the horns of the wild beast were on his head. They shot the arrows at him, threw their projectiles. The missiles bounced back, and he remained unharmed. In the Old Testament, Book of Job, chapter 41 and following, the prophet Job describes a fire-breathing leviathan that has variously been interpreted as a whale or a crocodile. His bones are as strong pieces of brass, his skeleton like iron bars. Out of his mouth go burning torches, and sparks of fire leap out. Smoke goes out of his nostrils as out of a seething pot. His breath scorches like glowing coals. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid, and they become mad with terror. Before his teeth a sword cannot be held, nor spear, nor missile, or yet armor. Such a creature has never existed at any point in history. I suggest that this example and every similar one from the ancient texts actually describes a misunderstood technology, just like a cargo cult, nothing more than that. And what the scriptures describe in words, the carvings describe in pictures. The Raimondi stele of Chavin de Huántar depicts technology. Where then did it come from? In my work, History is Wrong, I looked at the Book of Mormon. I highlighted an underground metal library mentioned there, which does in fact exist in Ecuador. Although the Book of Mormon is a religious and not a scientific work, it contains parts of a real history that date back thousands of years, just as the Bible and the Torah do. The written testimony in the Book of Mormon may very well describe the origins of Chavin de Huántar, with its incomprehensible technology and enigmatic engravings. In order to clarify these connections, I need to introduce you to some of my thoughts from History is Wrong. In the Book of Mormon, the Bible for the Mormon faith, a tribal chieftain by the name of Lehi becomes witness to a heavenly descent. And it came to pass, as he prayed unto the Lord, there came a pillar of fire, and dwelt upon a rock before him. And it came to pass that he saw one descending out of the midst of heaven. And he beheld that his luster was above that of the sun at noonday. Book of Mormon, chapter 1, verse 6 and following. The same thing happened with other major figures in the ancient texts: Moses, Abraham, the Pharaohs, Enoch, Arunja. In the Book of Mormon, it's Lehi. The being that emerges from the pillar of fire orders Lehi to summon his tribe to travel to a remote land. Under the guidance of the mysterious Lord, the clan builds 8 ships. The Lord then hands over 16 glowing stones, 2 for each ship, to illuminate the ship's interiors. In addition, Lehi receives 8 compasses, 1 to steer each ship. To state it in plain terms, Lehi and his clan were not engaging with a supernatural god who could produce wonders out of nothing. A god of wonders would have required neither lights nor compasses, in fact, would not have required ships at all. If they had, they would have been built according to the principles of engineering, not, as described, after the manner of men. Mormon researchers are convinced that Lehi's crew put to sea off the coast of today's Gulf of Aden and reached the South American coast via the southern Pacific Ocean. Lehi was a Jaredite, a descendant of Jared, the 6th patriarch before the flood. After the elderly Lehi had passed away, his son Nephi took over command. His successors call themselves Nephites, but the entire people, with its many branches, still calls itself Jaredite. And what did Nephi do in that strange mountainous country that we now call South America? And I, Nephi, did build a temple, and I did construct it after the manner of the temple of Solomon, save it were not built of so many precious things, for they were not to be found upon the land, wherefore it could not be built like unto Solomon's temple. But the manner of construction was like unto the temple of Solomon, and the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine. Book of Mormon, 2nd book of Nephi, chapter 5, verse 16. So, according to this statement, a temple was built in South America on a smaller scale than the one that Solomon created in Jerusalem in ancient times. It was laid out taking into account the 4 cardinal directions. It comprised a complex of outer and inner courtyards, a main temple containing many corridors and rooms, a sanctuary, and perhaps something mysterious, similar to the Ark of the Covenant. In addition, there was a water channel and 4 gates that pointed in the 4 cardinal directions. Finally, the structure was somehow connected to the sacred number 7. Last but not least, the temple in South America was built out of nowhere, so to speak, without any precedence in the typical South American cultures of the time. There is a long tradition associated with the number 7. Among the Jews, the 7 days of creation, like their 7 armed candlesticks, the menorah, testify to this. The Revelation of St. John speaks of the Book of 7 Seals. 7 also plays a similar role at Chavin de Huantar. There are 14, 2 times 7, cherubim engraved on the monolithic plate over the main gate. 7 of them looked toward the north, and 7 toward the south. Further down on the sunken square, where archaeologists found the Teo obelisk, stands the altar of the 7 goats. This is also known as the altar of Orion, because 7 holes in the altar plate roughly show the 7 main stars in the constellation of the same name. The Raimondi stele depicts 7 arms or snakes on each side. In fact, researchers have discovered that the number 7 is represented everywhere in the temple at the site. The similarities between the complex at Chavin de Huantar and King Solomon's temple in Jerusalem do not stop at the numerous references to the sacred number 7. Both sites are aligned along the 4 cardinal directions. Both are shrines, religious centers, and places of pilgrimage. Both temples stand above subterranean tunnels and canals. Both are made up of 3 terraces, one on top of the other. Chavin de Huantar contains a ventilation system in its windowless sanctuary and artificially lit inner chambers. So does the Holy of Holies in the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. And there are other similarities to bear in mind. The leaders or the priests at Chavin de Huantar have received technologies from their god that were ahead of their time, as did Moses, Solomon, and others in the Old Testament. The builders of Chavin de Huantar worshipped a flying god, as did the Israelites. This last statement will provoke the counter-argument that the Israelites had worshipped only the one ineffable God, but it was the God of Israel who descended.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?